Joining us now with analysis, Joel Rubin, Director of Policy and Government Affairs for the Ploughshares Fund. And we want to thank you for coming in. Joel, it's always great to have you here because you always have a lot of insight. And I want you to kind of walk us through some of the dialogue because it's all over the map. I'll start with British Foreign Secretary William Hague said remaining gaps were narrow in the search for an interim deal. But a senior negotiator for the U.S. told reporters it's hard. It's very hard. We've got narrow, hard. Which one is it?
Probably both. Right now, we're witnessing the best window for diplomacy that we've seen in years between the international community and Iran on their nuclear program. And today, the dialogue goes in Geneva, but even here in Washington, we're seeing these types of gaps. There's a desire to see a deal, but there's an understanding that we came close about 10 days ago in Geneva, and no one wants to get too far ahead and say that there is a definite deal. They understand that anything could come up at any time. So it's probably a mixture.
And I want to get from Geneva to Washington, but let's stay with Geneva for a little bit because another Western diplomat, guarded optimism, said the ball is in the Iranian court, though. And we did hear from the Iranian negotiator saying rights are not granted. They cannot be seized. So you have them kind of saying, hey, you can't push us too far. We may come a distance. How much is give and take right now?
Well, the P5+1 seems to believe that it has a good package, that it's offering something tangible on the table for Iran to take. And it believes that Iran should take this. There was a text that the P5+1 agreed to after the last round. They shared that with the Iranians. That's the base of the negotiations. There is an understanding that there will be amendments, but generally the negotiators from the West believe that the Iranians should take this first step, and then go to the comprehensive negotiations. But we saw yesterday, as you point out, the Iranian foreign minister put out a YouTube video talking about rights, but also giving language that was a bit vague in terms of what they need at the table. So I think there's a feeling out period right now. Both sides seem to believe they have the upper hand in these negotiations, that they can get something good. So we'll see if that coalesces.
There also seems to be some heated dialogue, and I want to touch on that. The supreme leader saying that Israel's the rabid dog of the region, claiming Israel poses a threat to the world, not Iran. How tough does that make it for the U.S. trying to negotiate, or even other Western nations, as far as getting a deal done when there's all this kind of strong rhetoric, not just from Iran, but also Israel as well?
Well, there's a lot of noise. There's a lot of noise here in Washington. There's a lot of noise in Israel, coming out of Tehran. That complicates the business of the negotiators. Right now, they're at the table. What we don't need to see is outside actors coming in a sense, through their words and undercutting what is being discussed. This is very sensitive. It's been very hard to get to this point. These are serious negotiations. And what it does is it undercuts confidence potentially amongst the publics of the countries that are involved in the negotiations. You know, they may get a deal at the table, but they're then going to have to sell this to their publics. And it's key to not lose that confidence.
Well, okay, and that's where I want to go. We've got this great image behind us, but we know there was another image at the White House, the president meeting behind closed doors with members of the Senate. This is going to be a tough sell for him with some constituents here in the United States as well, correct?
It is. Now, Americans poll consistently in favor of diplomacy. A poll just came out today. Roughly 3/4 of Americans support this outreach. But at the same time, there's also a deep skepticism about what can be achieved, a real ambivalence per se. So members of Congress, they look at those polls. They want to understand, how will this turn out for me politically? And right now, they're not sure. So they want to see the deal. They want to see how Americans respond. And it has the potential to become a partisan issue where Republican members will lead the charge, but it hasn't turned that way yet. Lead the charge against an agreement, but it hasn't turned that way yet. It's too early to tell. There still are enough serious members of Congress that do want to see an agreement that prevents a bomb in Iran's hand and prevents a war.
Well, undoubtedly, if there is an agreement, it's going to get even more interesting, and we'll have you back, Joel Rubin. Always a pleasure. Thanks so much.